All right. Well, welcome everybody. Everyone that's been here before, welcome. Goodwin, you may have been on before, but I don't recognize your name. So if you're new, especially welcome. So to Passive Cash Flow for Life for Multifamily. For those of you that don't know, Nicheole, that's speaker tonight, started in commercial real estate about 26 years ago and has expanded across the country with thousands of units. And then about 11 or 12 years ago, she actually started teaching. And then about 9 or 10 years ago, I can never remember how long, I took her course. We got along really well. We ended up partnering and we took it online actually in right before COVID hit. And then we started teaching Tuesdays about a year and 3 or 4 months ago, kind of as a give back. And at the same time, give people an opportunity to kind of dip their toe into multifamily. And if they like it, hopefully they will take the course. We think it's a huge, huge value add. And it's passivecashflowforlife.com. So if you have an interest, please go there. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Nicheole.
All right. And I would just mention that about the same time we started teaching Tuesday, our partners in crime over in the residential side, Jane and Sharon, started their teaching Tuesday too. So we go from one to the other. So this presentation is different than any one I've ever done before. So I would really appreciate some feedback in terms of if you want more of this, don't want more of this, kind of what different things. And I would appreciate some of the more experienced investors on the call, like Ernie and Jane and James and all of those. I don't know everybody else who's on. If you could kind of jump in too and just kind of um, tell the group what you're seeing and how you're viewing this. So what we're really talking about today, and I've got several graphs that I want to put up and just kind of show you that I have found to be kind of interesting in the last week or so. I don't know if people can see this. I'm hoping you can. I
Yeah.
couldn't get a really good picture of this, but this is a picture from basically the first. Now remember, most of this is on the government calendar. So their fiscal year runs from October to the end of September. So this is basically in all of 2023 and the first quarter of 24, which is October through December of 23. So I can't find any kind of summary information, but other than this. But if you kind of look, what stands out here is that credit card, these are default rates, delinquency rates. Credit cards and auto are way up. And historically, if you kind of look at the graphs and kind of follow this, credit cards seem to precede, they always tend to run a little bit higher, and their graphs start going up a little bit before some of the others do. And so I think that kind of is a kind of an interesting note. Now, if you notice, the student loans have gone way down. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. The trends for mortgage are just starting to trip up, and I have some other graphs to show you that. But when you start seeing data saying that credit card defaults are heading up, that tends to portend that other default rates are up. And so that was just kind of an interesting 90-day default rate delinquency. And this is actually, this is from the Federal Reserve of the New York Federal Reserve, the Consumer Credit Panel from them. All right, so this data comes from CoreLogic. And it's basically showing the overall default rate from 2023, February 23 to February 24. And you see it's down just a little bit. And that last year we were still coming out of some of the issues with COVID. And so things were running a little bit higher, particularly in the early part of the year, which I think has kind of bent the overall year average up, because it came down across 23. So if you kind of now look, the other thing I posted here is the default rates in the states that have the overall biggest default rate, and all of them except Louisiana have gone down. But if you kind of look, Maryland there is number 6 on the list. I don't know where Florida is, frankly. I don't know where some of these other states are, but this is all of the numbers. While they're down from 23, they're starting to tick up, and I'm going to start to show you kind of some of this. So just out of curiosity, Ernie and Jane and anybody else, are you seeing default rates starting to tick up or delinquency rates starting to tick up where you are? Anybody?
Yeah,
I
I think ticking up a little bit, and I mean, I think just people are trying to get out of it a different way with you know, subject twos, or just walking it to somebody else, or doing some different things. But yeah, they are ticking up a little bit.
Airbnbs are struggling.
Yeah, and I think that's, to Sharon's point on that, is just because the municipalities are changing the regulations and stuff to those. And I think some of that is also a lot of people don't want to get stuck. So now they're just kind of bailing um, before um,
Before?
I think you locked up.
I think you kind of cut out, Ernie. Are you still there? Right.
I think
did
he's
I
locked
cut
up.
off?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did.
I'm close to the airport, so they tend to block signals sometimes.
Okay. All you dangerous people. Yeah.
I tell you. Well, no, what I was saying is, like, to Sharon's point about the Airbnbs, the short-term rentals, is that a lot of the municipalities are changing their policies. And so some of them are already kicking into effect, and some are coming down the pipe. And so I think a lot of people are just kind of jumping the gun on some of that, so they don't get stuck. Because some of those they're doing the arbitrage
Yeah.
method on. Some of them they bought, and then they paid a little higher price point because of the high market that they were buying in. So there's just a variance of scenarios to it. But I have not. You got some good information on your sheets there. I didn't really look at like the credit card defaults, but I feel like what portion of that's to the businesses and what portion of that's to the residential type consumer, and then is that what are they correlated to? I'd be interested in.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I can see if I can find something kind of on that. The great majority of credit cards are individual consumer, not business credit. But I'll bet you there's some data out there about business credit. So, all right, so let's kind of talk. I want you to remember kind of this default rate and what Ernie and Sharon were just saying about the idea about that a lot of the Airbnb stuff, the short-term rentals is going away. Because I have a thought about a potential strategy that I don't know if anybody's using as we get down towards the end of this, and we can talk about this. So here is this other information. This is again February over February, and this actually is from CoreLogic again, and it actually looks at the past due rates. And so 30 days past due is down, but the 30 days, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, all of those until you get up to 120 days are about the same or a little bit higher. And then in foreclosure, they're looking the same too. I was trying to find actual numbers and I couldn't find them because there's such big numbers of mortgages out there that I think actually seeing the raw numbers would be interesting to look at. Because 0.3 and 0.3 is, it's pretty low, but I'd be interested to if I could see what the actual numbers were. And this is national data, so this doesn't take into account that some states are in different shape than others. All right, now this is commercial. James, are you seeing people in the waiting room? I've got that.
I got him. I put him in.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
You are, thank you. All right, so this is, again, if you kind of look at this, this is again the delinquencies over in the commercial sector. Multifamily is actually multifamily and industrial are doing better than anybody else. In fact, they're doing such it's pretty hard to see what the numbers actually are, but it's probably 1 to 2% or less for all of those. I actually have some numbers in another slide where there's actual numbers on these. So multifamily is pretty understandable because people have to have some place to live. But when I was trying to look at industrial, I was, a lot of this is the need for increased kind of space for people who are, storing things or have online retail, that they're having a lot of place where they're shipping out of small to medium and even large industrial spaces, particularly kind of warehouse kinds of things. That was kind of interesting. Those are kind of going like hot potatoes. The other thing we've known for a long time that office and retail are in trouble, but I'm seeing the same thing in lodging here. And the other big surprise was in health. And I'm not sure what that's about. I haven't actually got in and started looking at that. But has anybody got any thoughts about why lodging, the rates for delinquency are up in lodging? And if you're looking at the numbers, a lot of these are really, so those are pretty big numbers in terms of the 90-day late, the pink there. And the actual in foreclosure or REOs. What are your thoughts, guys?
Maybe a lot of them were doing the best they could after they got hurt in COVID and they just didn't make it and put in the towel.
Could be. Anybody
Some
else have
peop-
any thoughts here?
Some people bought too high thinking they could do stuff and they didn't.
Capitalize when the market was hot.
Do you think any of this is because more and more people would rather stay in short-term housing than in kind of lodging like this?
Could
Do you
be.
think-
Yeah,
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it got that short-term lodging actually got stopped in New York City probably 4 or 5 years ago, because all of the hotels and stuff got together and they didn't want people being able to not use their spaces. And so it became illegal there quite a few years ago. And they've been fining people like crazy. All right, so that's kind of interesting here. So let's kind of see. All right, so now here is we're going to switch now to talking about the affordability index. And I have some other information, but if you look at, these are the top 5 in the gold, the least affordable markets in the country, and then the blue are the most affordable. So if you're looking for areas to sort of think about not buying in, I would stay away from those that are probably so darned expensive, because you're not going to be able to rent them probably for what the mortgage is going to be on these. But and then if you look at the cheaper ones, those may be places where there are opportunity to actually find rentals, houses to buy, where you can still make a nice spread with rentals, that there's still affordability there.
It does in there the percentage of burden on someone's, I guess, paycheck in reference to how much their mortgage is. It's based on, I think it says here, based on an interest rate of 5.5. So obviously that's going to be even higher now with the rates being higher. So that's crazy.
So these are, so if you kind of remember that from back when, it's you want to keep your housing, if you could, of, you know, the in terms of gross, it was what, 35% of gross. So I'm sorry, 25% of gross, and 30 to 35% of net is what people were supposed to be spending on their housing. Does that sound right to people? It's been a long time since I really looked at those numbers.
Yes.
Okay. So if you look at this New York, over there, Miami, Florida, it's 84.3%. So housing is really expensive there, and the average house is 610,000 as compared to what the average salary is. So it kind of just gives you a sense of what some of these markets are looking at. All right, so I do want to talk a little bit about the affordability index here. I don't know if people really understand or know. I'm sure most of you do, but in case you don't, let's talk for just a minute about what it is. It takes into account, so it uses the average or the median salary in an MSA. And so they're different in different parts of the country. And so you're not actually comparing. So they're trying to do that so that, like, the median salary in Fort Wayne, Indiana is probably not as high as it is in Miami, Florida, from like those last two, right? And so although the salaries in Miami are probably not way high, what they try and do with the affordability index is to look to see what the median income is, and then look to see what the average house or the average payment that somebody could make given that salary, how much house they can afford. And a number of 1, so if you see something that's a 1, it means that the median household makes just enough to qualify for kind of an average house, right? If it is over 1, so it's 1.04, say, then it's more expensive. And so the median household or the median income isn't going to cover, isn't going to qualify people to cover for a mortgage, so to speak. And so the way they get in is by putting more and more down payment down, or getting some kind of assistance to make up that difference. If it is less than 1, it means that it is affordable, that more people can afford those. And so basically that's the gist of when you're starting to look at affordability indexes. Now, there are two main affordability indexes out there. The one that's put out by the National Association of Realtors, and then Goldman Sachs has one that a lot of the investment community uses, and that's actually the one I kind of like and use. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is that US News, and I actually put this in the chat box, provided a report on the affordability index by states. And it ranked them by, now this is the Goldman Sachs, by affordability, cost of living, and housing affordability, right? And so affordability in general means affordability to live in that area. It's not just housing affordability. So it's overall affordability. And so I put the link there if you want to kind of see what the cost of living is by state. It was a US News report. And so you just go to usnews.com and then look at rankings affordability. And I have, so here are the 5 most affordable states. And you can read the Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, and West Virginia. I'm sure none of those come as a big surprise to people. The 5 least affordable states are Washington State at 46, New York at 47, New Jersey at 48, Hawaii at 49, and California is the most expensive, is the least affordable state in the country. Now, a lot of us on this call are typically from Maryland and or Florida. Maryland comes in at number 44, so it's pretty darned expensive here, and Florida at 38. So if you, and because this is by state, it doesn't take into account it's an average. And so in Florida, there are areas that are not so expensive and some that are really expensive. Kind of same thing with Maryland. The DC area just has the most people, priced out of being able to buy. Whereas if you go over to Western Maryland and Cumberland kind of area, things are not so expensive. All right, so let's talk then about the I have got, the next slide has a couple of graphs about affordability in the rental market and what's going on there. And this is from 2022, but it's a really well done report. It comes from Harvard's Joint Center on Housing. And so while I couldn't actually find graphs from 23, I did find some data that shows that early 24 suggests that the situation is a little better than it was in 23. But and both of them, 22 was better than 23. And 24, is pretty bad, but things may be easing off a little bit as interest rates go up, okay? Things, particularly in the multifamily housing, is starting to come down a little bit in rents. And a lot of that is because between this year and next year, there is a whole lot of multifamily units that are coming online. And we talked about this, a few weeks ago in one of these things. But if I'm remembering back, there's something like 1 million units that are coming online in the next 2 years, which are going to have some downward pressure on rents. This study, anyway, when I was reading it, I had kind of 5 main takeaways from it. That rental markets are softening. The rental affordability is worse than it has ever been. This country is continuing to lose, so that's supposed to be lose, not lost, low-cost housing. Homelessness is rising across the country, and it's close to 500,000 people now are homeless. And the majority of the people are homeless because of the lack of affordability of housing. and rental assistance, which for a lot of years went a long way, particularly in the COVID years, because there was that extra money around. There was rental assistance if people needed to get into housing, and for a long time we couldn't evict people because of the COVID virus. So rental assistance is is short, and what is needed continues to be to get worse, not better. All right, I kind of have lost my slides there. There it is. Okay. All right. So one of the things, so here are these slides about the rental markets. And the one on the left is the number of renter households in the millions, right? And so you can see the number of rental housings. So 2020, there was no data. And that was kind of the COVID years right there. So, but the number of rental houses is continuing to go up in number in general, right? So the if you are now looking at the percent of these people, or the number of households, excuse me, that are severely cost burdened, I mean they really can't afford it. If you were looking at them in the affordability index, they are severe. So that's approaching half. And moderately cost burdened are some more. And then the blue line is kind of the overall number of rental housing. And so I'm guessing the other numbers there are less severely cost burdened with this. But as you can see, the distance between the top of the bar and the blue line seems to be getting shorter and shorter. If I come over here and I'm sort of looking at the loss of low-cost rentals, and this one is being shown in terms of the number of units that are actually so like if you look there on that first one, under $600, in 2012, there was a lot of rental units that fit there, that were in that range. And in 2022, the number of rentals that are $600 or less is down significantly. It's down 25-30%, or close to 25% close. So if you look at the numbers, so the 600 to 799, the number of units in that range are going down. The number of units from the 800 to 999, they're starting to come up. And then if you keep going looking, the units between 1,000 and 1,400, 1,400 to 2,000, there are more and more units who are being priced like that. There are more units that are there and fewer units. There were less units in 2012 like that. And look at the difference in particularly in the 2,000 and over, right? So I think there's a clear case to be made that affordable housing is getting more difficult to find, and people can't afford it. So all of the numbers are showing that there really is a crisis in this country in affordable housing. So that takes me, I'm going to kind of stay away from that slide. That takes me back to this idea, and I would really like to get a discussion started here with people on this. There is a real push away from allowing short-term rentals in these jurisdictions. And there's more and more communities and neighborhoods and kind of housing developments that are going there. All right. So that's number one. So now what are we going to do when all of these people can't afford this anymore, right? So on the other hand, you have this issue with affordability, and that's getting worse. There's more and more people being homeless. There is a trend in this country for shared housing, yes? Where there's more than one family living in a property. So part of my thinking is there was probably some opportunity out there to find some of those people who can't afford the short-term rental properties anymore, or they're going to go away. And we take over the payments, and now we start renting them as shared housing. A lot of those houses are already furnished. A lot of them have bigger, more bedrooms, more things like that. And I think that I haven't run the numbers, but I think that that is going to work in a lot of areas and a lot of things. So I'd really like to hear your thoughts and ideas. Anybody?
You're saying in regards to like the market, right? Or like what our thoughts are in regards to what we think. Well, I mean, when you were presenting, what I thought or came to mind is like, mobile home parks, because if there's going to be a increase, right, in thousands of multifamily going into coming into the list, right? My first assumption is, okay, everybody, and the rents are going to drop. Typically, wouldn't you say that mobile home parks are typically standard in regards to like the pricing, and it doesn't fluctuate, whereas a multifamily will fluctuate a lot?
Manufactured housing units are getting more expensive, but they are still affordable. Most of them are affordable. So, and there is a lot of manufactured housing communities out there that have a lot of vacant lots in them that you can get homes in and put them in and get them rented. So that is certainly an area for affordability. It is probably the last area where you still have affordable housing in a lot of places in this country. There's still a fair amount of stigma associated with, quote, trailer parks, even though we don't call them trailer parks. But what I'm really saying here is that I think this has to do with, and so I do think that manufactured housing is a good place to be looking to buy properties because they are affordable. And you don't have any problems getting those units filled these days, particularly if it's a decently maintained property. And at this point, I have quite a number of manufactured housing communities, so I'm pretty comfortable in saying I know what I'm talking about here. But what I'm saying in this case more falls into the residential space, but using it in a different way. So taking over payments, not buying houses that have been that were sold originally to people who were going to use them as short-term rentals and they paid too much. I'm talking about taking over the payments and then trying to make them more affordable by making them available to 2 or 3 families.
So are you referring to more like wholesaling, Nicheole? I'm sorry.
I'm not talking about I'm going to buy it and hold it, but you could certainly do some arbitrage, meaning you could find somebody who wanted to do this and you could sell the property to them on owner financing, and then they can find other people to put it in. Or if you have a need to be or wanting to build a rental portfolio, then you kind of do it yourself with a property manager and put, a couple of families into the same house. So they're going to be sharing some common spaces, but it helps with the affordability. You can now afford probably to take over that house and still pay the mortgage and the insurance because you have two families who are trying to share that space. So it sounds like I'm not doing a very good job explaining this, Joanna. Has anybody want to try and take a crack at this to see if you can make it clearer? And what do you think about the idea?
Nicheole, this is Nasha. Are you describing a boarding house?
It's not a boarding house. It is not a boarding house. So here in Maryland, what's going on is that if you have a house, right, and somebody owns a house, because things are so unaffordable here, what people do is they take this one house and they rent it to two families. So two families are sharing the same house. It's not a boarding house where people are, although I can see that there's some similarities. But you have families with children sharing these houses. And so, and you're not collecting like boarding houses, a lot of them you're collecting rents for every week. And you typically have one or two people per room. This is actually something that is kicking up in a lot of the more expensive markets where people are actually, you're actually taking a single family house or a townhouse and renting it to two or three families so that none of them have to pay so much. It's the same concept of you own a house and you rent your basement out to a family or a couple of people, right?
Mhm.
You've all heard of that, right?
Yep. Yep.
It's
And so
kind of
this
similar
is,
to pad
this is,
split,
I'm sorry?
kind of
Yes.
similar to a pad split.
Pad split for families. I think we just created something new.
You did.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was gonna say next, the pad split. Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah, 'cause
that sounds,
I haven't heard that term, so you guys just taught me something.
Yeah, pad split, you just, it's typically there's renting out a room each, but so you're kind of just saying pad because typically you can't have like husband, wife, it can just be one person. So this
Mhm.
is pretty much like pad split for family. So you just created a whole new niche.
That's really cool because the pad splits, they have a lot of rules, but it is monthly rents. It's not like
Mhm.
weekly. And they, everybody shares the common areas and,
Yeah.
the kitchens and bathrooms and also it's very similar to what you're explaining.
So, well, I now have better terminology to use it, but I think that takes care of two looming problems and is if you can figure out how to make it work. So, what of any of the others of you think that might do? Is that a possibility?
This is
Yeah.
Goodwin.
I
So
think
I'm in,
even, sorry,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, in some places like New Jersey that I've seen, you mentioned that they are some of the most expensive areas. I mean, I see it all there already. There's like houses that have three families pretty much. Yeah, exactly that. It's just lower levels of family, middle floors
Mhm.
another family, and then there's an upstairs that's another little apartment. That also is pad splits. I guess we're seeing it someplace as well where ADUs are being encouraged. I even think some places in Maryland here where they're like allowing or encouraging ADUs. So I don't know if so which I guess makes it, instead of being able to buy and analyzing numbers for just a single family, you kind of can think of the rent of like a studio or one bedroom apartment.
So if you take the idea that houses, so I'm in Montgomery County, which is not the cheapest county in Maryland, right?
Mhm.
So, but rents here for a 3 bedroom, 2.5 bath townhouse are 2,500, 2,600. And for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, they're 3,000. There aren't a lot of people can afford that. But if you can take that same property and now send it to 2 or 3 families for 12 to 1,500 a piece, now all of a sudden it's more affordable. Not great, but better. And so I think if you kind of look at the mortgage prices that a lot of these people in, particularly about short-term rentals, the mortgage they have to cover, and particularly as insurance is going up in coastal kind of areas like crazy, it now becomes, the numbers now make some sense because of where you can rent to 2 or 3 families. That's all I'm saying, is that I think there's a niche opening up and that we ought to sort of be aware of it. Somebody else started to say something. Can you kind of jump back in?
Yeah, this is a good one. So I don't know about the others on this call, but I'm currently in the California area, but my properties are in Arizona. And so here we're the home of ADUs and junior ADUs. So there's a clear delineation of how families would be able to go ahead and share essentially the same general property, but with the amenities that they've come to expect. So their own kitchen, they don't have to share a kitchen with another family. Same thing with a bathroom. So there's more expense involved with it other than just taking over a single family home. There's an investment to go ahead and split it up by partitioning a wall, putting in a kitchenette, putting in a bathroom where possible, converting a room into a bedroom, things like that.
Is this actually by statute or by county rules?
This is by state. So
Okay, that's
there's
not, we don't see that in a lot of the rest of the country, but
right.
California leads the way in a lot of things.
So we have what is called SB 9, SB 10, which basically from a state level overruled city level governance in
Oh,
terms of how you could put on additional housing on your property. So where
oh,
before you had to get permission at the city or maybe county
Mhm.
level, state is now overruling that. And of course there's some pushback on that. Um, and there's some counties that recognize that. LA County, for example, has long recognized that housing is an issue. So they've adopted different ADU plans that are
Mm.
basically now off the shelf rather than trying to customize stuff according to your property. But those can still take place too. The cities are still fighting back in the sense that with additional state bills that have recently passed, they even talked about, well, if you created an ADU and you actually did separate metering for
Mhm.
power and water and things like that, could you not also split the parcel and sell that ADU as well? So that had recently passed, and I think there's some kickback on that one as
Yeah,
well.
I'm sure. Yeah. That you're basically condoizing a building at that point, condoizing a
And
house.
exactly how it's being treated. And so now you have to create your own mini HOA
Yep, yep.
and administer that. So there's certainly additional guidance that's involved with doing anything like that. But that's if you actually go down to where you actually sell it off as well, which in some cases people would do that to go ahead and get a portion of their primary residence paid off just by separating a small piece and building something on it, basically raising the
Mhm.
valuation and then selling that off and then applying the proceeds to their own primary residence and getting that paid off. So there's
Yeah.
different strategies at work here as well.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of the, states, I mean, you kind of, well, I lived in California for 10 years. San Francisco area, and kind of if you can spell bureaucracy, California, it kind of steps up right up to the plate.
Yep.
So if there's one thing, I don't think we would want to kind of incorporate some of that, but a lot of the rest of the country isn't there yet. So this is just an idea. I'm going to kind of hit quick here a couple of things, and then we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So we have an online course that covers. This is multifamily. It covers finding the markets, all the acquisitions, underwriting, raising private money, managing property managers, and building and managing a business, which is all the things you need to know if you're going to be dealing with multifamily real estate truthfully. And it's about 36 modules, about 60 hours. We talk about a lot of these kinds of things in it. If you're interested in looking to see a little bit more about that, you can go look at passivecashflowforlife.com. I'm going to be doing on June 29th from 12 to 4. I'm going to be doing a webinar, a live webinar on land trusts. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about land trusts, and there is a lot of things you can do with them that have benefits that most people don't know anything about. And it's going to be about $49. So hopefully James will be getting that up in the next 3 weeks if you're interested in that and signing up for that. We also, if you have questions, you can email us at support@passivecashflowforlife.com. And all of these Teaching Tuesdays we put up on our YouTube channel, and you can see our YouTube channel address there. And this presentation should be up by the end of the week, as well as the others we've done. So we've probably got 50 or 60 up there now in a playlist. And I think at this point, I'm going to stop sharing. And then we got, 10, 15 minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions that they would, we had about 10 minutes, and then we're going to turn it over to our other partners. So open for questions.
So Emma had a good idea here. She says, also maybe multi-generation housing where more desirable properties are the ones with in-law separate spaces, mainly from family members, that would help lower overall living costs.
Yeah.
So it's interesting too, with the cost of assisted living. It's a long time ago, like 10 or 15 years ago, when my mom unfortunately had to go into an assisted living, it was $9,000 a month. Now, granted, that was a little more expensive than a lot of places, but it's $9,000 a month. And I think a lot of people can't afford that. So I wonder if there's a market for that, where you could offer a property with the idea of having exactly what Emma is talking about, an in-law suite attached to it.
Yeah, that's a possibility. So if all of you remember, I don't know, a lot of you probably don't, but our friend that died not too terribly long ago, Dave Wandell, actually would buy houses with 5 to 7 bedrooms, and then he would sell them on owner financing to some of these smaller mom and pop things who were doing assisted living kinds of properties, and he would just fund the deal. And that was one of his niches. Any other questions, comments? Are you interested in these kinds of presentations? Because like I said, I've never done one that really just kind of focused on some of the, kind of the financial and or other kind of real estate data that's out there.
I found
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
interesting.
Good to know.
And Scott says yes. Manny says yes. Kumbui says yes. Emma says yes.
I think Joe has his hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I think just dwelling on the delinquency data we were going through earlier, how does that translate into identifying distressed properties locally that you might consider for an acquisition?
I think the best way to do that is now, I actually have a subscription to oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on it right now. It's a database, PropStream. And it's a national database that has vacant houses, foreclosures, liens, tax liens, all sorts of information on it that you can, it's a monthly or yearly fee, and you can download up to, and you can sort it by county, by town, by state. Not all of the data is accurate. So a lot of the things I'll have is vacant houses are actually rental houses. And what they're really picking up is where the tax address is different than the property address. But sending letters there, doing some quick, what am I trying to say, where you're trying to use a third party to get the addresses and phone numbers. I'm having an Alzheimer's
Skip
moment.
trace. Just skip tracing them.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was right at the tip of my tongue. I was
do
gonna
that all
get there. I was gonna
I
get
know.
there.
I know
I
you
Yes, you
were.
were.
So, any case, but they will also have within there a skip trace element where you can pay not very much to actually get phone numbers and stuff. And so you buy that, and then you pick the zip codes, the areas that you're interested in, and send letters, do robocalls, go visit, do whatever kinds of things like that. But that's where I would get that information.
Thank you. I'll have to look into that one.
Any other questions? All right, so let me ask, what other kinds of kind of more general, I don't know if it's called financial or other kinds of data, would you be interested in me trying to find something out about and put up a presentation on it?
I
All right.
don't know if there's any precedent for it, but I think maybe a survey of cap rates by regional markets.
Okay. Yeah, that should be fairly easy to do. They that I would bet you I can find something like that. So purchase cap rates, and for different kinds of asset classes are different. It's different for, so apartments are different than manufactured housings, are different than, than self-storage and stuff like that. So they vary by that kind of assets too. Jane, Sharon, Ernie, anybody else got any kind of ideas? Mel, Joanna, anybody got any information or things that you'd like to see us talk about?
Ernie, what is attacking you? Is that a bird? Ernie's
You're on mute, Ernie.
You talking about me? Someone attacking me?
Yes.
No, it's the other son.
my God, it's a bird coming after you. It looks
He's
like-
attacking me. He's attacking me.
All right. Well, I think that we won't prolong this. At this point, let me turn it over to our partners, Jane and Sharon. I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to let James introduce them. And I appreciate your comments and your attendance here, and hope to see you next week.